It's the Pacers. It's the Bucks. It's the Haliburton Dame time. It's the game ball. It's the first round of the NBA playoffs. Crossing it over. Locked on Pacers, Locked on Bucks. We'll preview it all today. Let's get to it.
You are Locked On Bucks, your daily Milwaukee Bucks podcast, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
What up, y'all? Happy Friday. It's crossover time. We got to look ahead at Pacers Bucks. I'm Tony East, the host of Locked On Pacers. With me is Camille Davis, half of Locked On Bucks. And boy, do we have a lot to get to against two teams that had such a crazy regular season series, Camille, that people, including me, were saying, is this a rivalry from regular season games? Are you excited? How do you feel about what this could be?
I'm super excited about it. Like, Bucks Pacers was honestly something that had me going, like, thank you playing, like, or not playing tournament, but thank you in-season tournament. Like, I appreciate you, because without that in-season tournament adding a little extra spice to the matchup, like, it helped force these teams to see each other 5 times in the same season, all before January 3rd. So, like, not only did they see each other a lot, they saw each other a lot in a very short period of time, which definitely amped the stakes. I'm excited for it. This was one I was hoping we might get in the playoffs, so I'm happy that it's here.
5 times in 55 days, and the players around the time said, the players all said, it's not a rivalry till the playoffs. Well, guess what? Now it is the playoffs, and that's what we will talk about today. Thanks for making Locked On Pacers or Locked On Bucks your first listen every day, free and available wherever you get your podcast and on YouTube, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. And this episode brought to you by FanDuel, America's #1 sportsbook. Right now, new customers get $150 in bonus bets with any winning starting bet guaranteed. That's $150 win or lose. Visit FanDuel.com/lockedon to get started. Camille, any preview of this series starts with one question, and you know what it is, and you guys have been living it on your side of the Midwest since April 9th when he fell to the floor against the Bucks. What do you anticipate Giannis's health status being? Is it even possible to predict? What's the latest there? Do you expect he plays in game 1, game 2? What are you thinking on that front?
Listen, it's really hard to tell at this point. Like, we have been blessed as Bucks fans and people who follow the team with Giannis, because he has what we call like a Wolverine-like ability to heal. Like, he just comes back really quickly. When he feels pain, he has a very high pain tolerance. He's always fighting to come back. He puts in the work. So he's somebody who normally you see him sprain an ankle or he goes down, you're like, he won't be out too long. But like, he is getting older as well. And I also think it's just somewhat unfair for us to expect all the time that his body will continue to respond the way we've seen it respond before in the past, because this is a soft tissue injury, something that he mentioned himself during the season that you don't really want to play around with. So there is no doubt that Giannis is working as hard as he possibly can to try to get back on the court. We heard him after the fifth Pacers loss. Like, you think about it all the time. You think about it when you're working out. You think about it, when you're getting freaky. You just always think about it.
Listen, I was standing a foot away from him when he said that. If you watch back that quote and you hear somebody chuckle, that was me. I ruined it. It was very funny.
It was unexpected, but like, it just goes to show what he's meaning about, like, you're thinking about this. So of course he wants to get back, but I've been saying something that I heard Chris Middleton mention which is like, we haven't had him, so we're assuming we're not going to have him. It's as simple as that. Like, once he's cleared, then we go forward with that. But until then, we're moving and operating like he won't be here. And I think that's safe to say, at least for game 1 and 2. That game 3 mark puts him at that 2-week mark of like when that injury occurred. And he was between a 1 and 2 week prognosis at the beginning. So that feels like somewhere, like, if I had to guess, I would say around that game 2, game 3 mark. But this completely a guess. Like, do not take my word as law with that.
Well, your guessing is about what I've been guessing for similar reasons. We've heard 1 to 2 weeks. Sham said 2 to 4 today on some stream thing he was doing. And the only reason I mentioned that is because Doug McDermott, a Pacers wing, he had a calf strain this season. Not all calf strains are the same. I'm not going to compare them, but when he talked about it afterwards, he said 2 to 4. So that's why I'm likening this to what Shams just said. He missed about 3.5, but he's not Wolverine. It's not the playoffs. That's different, right? So it's hard to compare it to anything, but like 2 weeks has been in my head. Like, that's when it could be like realistic for him to play. And that's why I thought it was fascinating to track when the games were in this series. Like, the actual scheduled dates of the games mattered. And so had game 2 been next Wednesday, which I believe is the 24th, that would have been basically exactly 2 weeks, 1 day under that. And then I thought maybe, but because it's Tuesday, I'm with you. I'm like, maybe not game 2, but to everyone, we're both guessing. And it's funny, just guessing. It's funny because the Pacers did very well against the Bucks in the regular season. We'll just talk about it in just a second. But Giannis was not the reason why. What was it, 43 and 13 he averaged against the Pacers, including his career high in the game that shall not be named. So it's obviously massive. He's won a championship. Like, any game he misses and gives the Pacers a chance to win or steal home court advantage is just critical for the series. And one more thing. Sorry.
Go ahead.
I think it's funny what Chris Middleton said, because if you're the Pacers, you have to prep like he's going to play. And if you're the Bucks, you have to prep like he's not. So I'm very curious how those things intersect in game 1. Okay, sorry.
No, absolutely. And with him not playing, and Dame has not practiced yet this week for the Bucks as well. So that's thrown some things in the loop for the Bucks and their practice schedule. But I think it's also a benefit, because what's happened now is that Chris Middleton and Bobby Portis have been getting a lot of reps ran for them in practice. And Chris Middleton is going to be an extremely important piece for this team in this series, as well as Bobby Portis, especially if Giannis is missing time. Like, he is someone who's going to slot into a lot of minutes, and a lot will be expected of him as well in the series. So for them to be able to be getting reps and trying to simulate, hey, you might be getting trapped. You don't know what the pressure is going to be, especially if Giannis is on the court. So just being able to get used to some different looks, I think, has been one of, like, the, I guess, if you want to call it a injury positive, just to get guys comfortable in some roles that they might have to face in the series is going to be big. But without Giannis, listen, the Bucks are a really top-heavy team. It's Dame, it's Giannis, and it's Chris as your primary ball handlers and shot creators. You have Bobby off the bench, but he's not bringing the ball up at all. You know what I mean? So without Giannis, that puts you down to really like 2 main ball handlers, and then you have a Pat Bev who you're looking to help facilitate. But Giannis also creates so much pressure on the drives and to be able to drive and kick as well. Losing someone like that is going to be really big for the Bucks to overcome. So they're going to have to make sure their offense is together, the ball movement is right, and that they're making the right plays, even when the first play is breaking down.
For sure. I am with you that Middleton is huge. Like, I've mentioned this on my show before, but that Mavs Jazz series 2 or 3 years ago, where Luka missed the first couple of games with a muscle injury. I can't remember which one. And Jalen Brunson went crazy in game 2. He was awesome, 45, I think. And they stole a game to keep it 1-1. And then when Luka did return, they just needed to get one back in Utah to be right back where they started. And they won that series in 6 games, right? Like that. Brunson, their second best player, or their second best initiator at the time, being huge, was massive. Like, if Middleton can step up on the wing, I think that can be akin to that. You guys have probably talked about this. Every time I've had somebody on, even by myself, I've talked about this. I'm curious what your take is. The Pacers and Bucks played 5 times in 55 days this season. They're also a long time ago.
Yeah.
Do you take anything from that heading into this series? It was pre-coaching change, pre-Siakam. What are you drawing from those 5 regular season games, if anything, as a preview for what could be coming?
The biggest thing to draw, because honestly, like you mentioned, the teams are a lot different. And I definitely want to ask you a little bit more about how Siakam has changed the dynamics for the Pacers, because from my understanding, you're a little bit more mid-range heavy than you guys were when we saw you earlier on in the season. But on the Bucks side, the thing you take away from this matchup is how you really got killed, and that's transition defense. Like, the Pacers are the ideal type of team that can give the Bucks trouble, because listen, the Bucks are old, they're a little bit slower, right? Doc Rivers has said time and time again, we do not want to get into track meets, okay? We want to be in the mud. We want to play a physical game. We want to slow things down as much as we can. Like, of course, if we can get out and push, then we will, but really what we're trying to live is in the physical realm. So that's one thing I'm looking for or saw in the old matchups, which was the transition defense was just god awful for the Milwaukee Bucks. Like, it would be guys back and the ball is still just going over the top and it's still an easy bucket for the Pacers. So that's the first thing that I look back with the old matchups where I'm like, this carries over, because that's how the Pacers want to play. Like, that transition defense has to be on point for the Bucks, and the Bucks offense can't help to lead to more Pacers offense. Like, the Bucks have to be disciplined in their shot selection. They have to be disciplined on when they ISO, when they move the ball, like try and take advantages of mismatch, not just for individuals, but for teammates as well. So finding that right balance, knowing that the Pacers will run after makes and misses, is going to be super important for the Bucks.
Yeah, it's like burnt in my brain, the in-season tournament semifinal game. The Bucks would score. It wasn't even transition. Yes. And Isaiah Jackson would just sprint up the floor and dunk. It's like, how is that even possible for an NBA team? And then that was the night that reportedly Bobby Portis did some stuff in the locker room and got the ball rolling on what may be now the changes that happened to the Bucks. Yeah, you nailed a lot of it there. The change that I think there's a couple other things. Obviously, Siakam's huge. The coaching change is huge. The thing that I think is the most significant is Patrick Beverley being in the mix, and at the same token, because it's the same trade, campaign not being in the mix,
Yes.
because during the season, every time the Pacers play the Bucks, the Pacers guards would be sensational, right? Matherin, who won't be playing, obviously, McConnell, beyond Haliburton, all of them. Bruce Brown, who's not playing anymore, right? They all had great games because they were just getting by their man over and over. And that puts a lot of pressure on your defense. Now there's one less bad defender and one good defender in the mix on the perimeter. I still think there's going to be ways for the Pacers to exploit that we'll get to, but it's a lot more balanced in a way that is meaningful. And I think that's a significant change from the regular season that also makes it hard to draw from that. We have a lot more that we have to get to on this, but I think, Camille, we need to take a break to talk about two wonderful groups of people. The first one being Yahoo Finance. Wouldn't it be great if you could see all of your investment and retirement accounts in one place? Well, with Yahoo Finance, you can consolidate your views from multiple accounts in one hub and access expert analysis that you'd need to tend to your entire portfolio with confidence. For more than 25 years, Yahoo Finance has been the brand behind every great investor. Whether you're a seasoned investor or looking for just some extra guidance, Yahoo Finance gives you all the tools and data you need in one place. They are number one in the finance destinations, producing a holistic look at the financial news cycle, including breaking news, original editorial perspective, analyst ratings, independent research, customizable charts, and so much more. Securely link your brokerage accounts for a unified view of your wealth, including 401ks and other investments. A comprehensive perspective is what sets apart great investors. It's how Yahoo Finance ensures you have the right insight to look at your wealth. And with a community of over 90 million users each month, their real strength is helping you on your way to financial success. For comprehensive financial news and analysis, visit the brand behind every great investor, yahoofinance.com, the number one financial destination, yahoofinance.com. That's yahoofinance.com. And one more, let's talk about the great folks over at FanDuel. It's playoff time. Pacers Bucks coming up soon. The NBA, NHL rolling into their postseasons, and baseball in full swing. Camille may be a Brewers fan. I hope not. Go Phillies. FanDuel is your place to bet on every single game, no matter what your favorite sport is. Right now, new customers get $150 in bonus bets guaranteed just by signing up. That's $150 win or lose. You can bet on everything from slap shots to home runs to slam dunks, all on an app that's safe, secure, and super easy to use. What are you waiting for? Visit FanDuel.com/lockedon to make your first bet an automatic win. That's on FanDuel, America's number one sportsbook. Back here crossing it over, Locked On Pacers and Locked On Bucks ahead of one of the more interesting first round series. Would you like to talk some Pacers first, Camille, or Bucks first? Because I have a big question about the Bucks. You are muted. Uh-oh.
Hold on, my bad. I have some Pacers questions for you,
Okay.
though, because
Let it
listen,
fly.
we talked a bit about Giannis's injury, but Haliburton has also dealt with some injury this season. Like the hamstring has really, from my understanding, changed the dynamics of his play a little bit. And against the Bucks, Haliburton was so aggressive looking for his shot as well. And that was a big piece of his game. But I've saw since the hamstring injury that he hasn't been attempting as many shot selections. The numbers have come down a bit. Where is he at on his health journey right now? And how has that been affecting his play so far?
Yeah, the biggest thing with him and that injury was the threes, right? And ironically, that's the thing that made him like unguardable during the stretch where he was tearing apart the Bucks every 11 days, was that he would take 9 to 12 every game and make 4 to 6 of them. And then the Pacers would just win because he'd have a bunch of points. And so the hamstring injury, like at first he couldn't get to that stepping back to the right fadeaway that he was just drilling. He couldn't create as much separation. So like he'd still get by guys. His 2-point percentage was actually higher after the All-Star break. His passes were up. His potential assists were about the same. His teammates just weren't shooting as well. Numerically, a lot of his stats were really similar, but you nailed it. The shots from three were way down and not going in nearly as much. It was really bad for a while there in early to mid-March. And he said he was healthy, and maybe he was. I think that he was still feeling it a little bit, and no star player has ever wanted to show signs of weakness ever in their life, including Bucks players, right? So like every big game he had was after they had like a gap. Right after the All-Star break, he had 25 and 13. They'd have 2 days off, and then he'd be dunking again all of a sudden. Like that was really important. And so for him to get this much time off, I talked about this on my own show yesterday. I think it's good for him to have that gap to heal, but it also means Giannis is healing, right? So who knows if that's actually an advantage for the Pacers, but it does mean that Tyrese Haliburton is getting healthier, which is significant because the threes that the Bucks saw him rein in all these games were a valuable part of what made him so great, and they went away. So if that can be approaching what he was when he was one of the best pick your number between 1 and 10 players in the NBA, that would be massive in this series.
Yeah, absolutely. And you mentioned Pat Beverly a little bit earlier, and we can definitely talk about what he brings to the team and exactly how I think he's going to be used in this series. Because again, like I mentioned a little bit earlier, without Giannis, I think that Pat Bev is going to have a little bit more offensive responsibility as well. But before we get there, Siakam in, Buddy Hield is gone, Benedict Mathurin out for the season, like Bruce Brown gone. How have the Pacers been playing since the trade deadline? Because, I mean, as we've mentioned, the Bucks saw the Pacers prior to the trade deadline. So we saw a completely different version of this team. Meanwhile, you guys have not seen a Doc Rivers coached Bucks team or a team with Pat Bev on it. So on your side of things, what has changed for the Pacers and their play since the trade deadline heading into this playoff series?
Yeah, they've got a duo, right? Siakam just is another element they have not had, not even this season or like stylistically, but just someone that height, right? Like that sounds so simple, but just a natural 4 who can play inside out has given them so much on both ends. Their only guy about that height that played was Obi Toppin, but his defensive level wasn't even close to what Siakam's is, even though Siakam hasn't defended that well. So you nailed one part of it earlier, and that's that he adds a mid-range element that's like, when you think about the Pacers, you don't think, oh, mid-range. Yeah, totally. Right. But that element's really nice. Like he'll start a possession and go set a screen for Haliburton or a fake screen, go screen, whatever. And if they switch and put the small on him right then, he's like, great, I'm going to go post up now. Good luck. And they just score, right? His post-up efficiency with the Pacers has been awesome. He can drill shots from the elbows, right? That kind of wrinkle where you have to think about who you're putting on him, how you're defending two-man actions with him, another star, has been where he's really elevated the Pacers. During that stretch where Haliburton was struggling, he was by far their best player. It wasn't even close. And so that's been huge. And then having someone of that size has been super valuable for them defensively, because now everybody else falls into place. Like Aaron Nesmith isn't defending power forwards anymore. Their last game before acquiring Siakam, they played the Utah Jazz. Andrew Nembhard was guarding Lauri Markkanen in that game. And it was like their best answer for someone of that size. And now that Siakam's on the team, everybody's matchup makes more sense. It's really elevated Miles Turner. So, of course, he's good, right? He's a great player. He's going to be valuable in the series. He's won a championship before. But the biggest thing he's added to the Pacers, like holistically, is now everyone else's role makes more sense defensively, too. And so they've been like about an average defense in the last month and a half. And, of course, he's an amazing offensive player. He'll be valuable in the series. But I think how he's boosted his teammates around him on defense just by being 6'9" has been equally important to the Pacers.
Yeah, and that's going to be something that's really important against the Bucks, especially when I'm going to say when. Yeah,
please manifest it. I want to see him play.
Exactly. Some positivity put on my vision board as well. But no, just having another big body to throw out there, because it was really Miles Turner than Jalen Smith, where you're thinking like, here are the bigs who we can throw out here. And the Bucks love playing double big. Like they start when healthy, Brook Lopez with Giannis Antetokounmpo, and then that's really their 3-man big rotation. Bobby, Giannis, Brook, and then you might get some small ball forward with like Jay Crowder coming in, who is somebody who only played one game during the regular season matchup between these two teams. So he's someone as well you can kind of take off the bench, throw in as an other 4, but that's something that Siakam does provide. He provides a little bit more size against this Bucks team that likes to use their size to their advantage when they can. Although I think they haven't necessarily taken advantage of mismatches as well as they could have. And that's something I'm hoping to see that they do in this Pacers matchup when it happens. Like I think Brook Lopez is going to be very important for that very reason.
Agreed. Yeah, the front court in general, I was talking about this with someone looking mostly from a Pacers perspective, but it's so natural in all of our brains to go, well, Siakam's the 4, he'll be on Giannis. But like, you don't guard Giannis with one guy. Like that's just not how it works. And 2, maybe you don't want to do that. Maybe you want it to be Miles Turner or Aaron Nesmith and then catch matchups elsewhere and try to live with Brook Lopez threes. But then if he makes them, you're in a lot of trouble and he's a good shooter. So it's like that both directions. I think the cross matching in the front court is going to be endlessly fascinating, and Siakam's inclusion, just his mere existence, is part of why that's so fascinating. Do you have any other Pacers questions?
I guess I'll end it with this one when it comes to the Pacers here, because this is more of a general. I know we're going to get into the next segment here and talk about some key matchups and players and of course predictions, but this is more of a feel thing. How have Pacers fans how are they feeling heading into this series against the Bucks? Because I feel like Pacers over Bucks has been a popular upset pick.
Popular.
And I understand why, especially with the Giannis injury news. You're looking at the regular season, but just general, like, what are the vibes for Pacers fans heading into this series as well?
Yeah, my general question about the Bucks that we'll get to, I think, is part of why the answer is fans feel very confident, and that's that the Bucks have been playing that good recently. And Giannis is hurt, and every day it seems like there's some little thing about Damian Lillard that's like, yeah, my entire body's hurt, and I don't like it here. And it's like, I don't know if he actually does or doesn't. I'm not going to speak for him, but it seems like every day the next report about Dame is like really sad, and he's amazing, and I'll be curious what he looks like in this series. But like, especially given how the regular season went, even though I don't put any stock into that, I can't blame fans for doing so. So I think Pacers fans feel pretty good, which is very fascinating to me because this is the Pacers' first series since the bubble, right? Like it's very it's different. It's different basketball. I don't know what the Pacers are going to look like when the game slows down and they're on a bigger stage. Last year, the Cavs also rolling into the playoffs and got their stuff rocked by the Knicks, right? So I don't really know how to feel, but a lot of people around here think, and I get why. Like, I'm not saying they're dumb for thinking this. In fact, you'll see my prediction in a minute, but are very confident in what the Pacers can do in this series.
Yeah, and that kind of checks on how I feel like with Bucks fans, where like there's a subset who are like, we're flaming out in the first round again. It's done. It's over. It's no reason to watch. And then you have this other group that's like, believe in this team. Like they have the talent. Like they can make it to the finals. And that's how I feel about this team, where it's like they've been so inconsistent this season, where it's like if they did flame out in the first round, it would be like, I can see how this happened. I understand. Like you can look at it, the team construction, the health, and like I get it. If they made it to the finals, you can be like, I get it. Like it started to click for this team. Like the floor and the ceiling for this team are both very low and very high. And it's really hard to try to figure out where they're going to come in. And I can't wait to talk a little bit more about just how they ended the season heading into the playoff when we come back.
That is a big question before we make predictions. They lost to the Raptors and the Wizards and the UNI and then beat the Celtics like 2 days later. Who the hell are the Bucks right now? We'll get to that in just a moment here. Before we do so, though, let's talk about LinkedIn Jobs. When you're hiring for your small business, you want to find quality professionals that are right for the role. That's why you have to check out LinkedIn Jobs. LinkedIn Jobs has the tools to help you find the right professionals for your team faster and for free. LinkedIn, not just a job board. It'll help you find and hire professionals you can't find anywhere else, even those who aren't actively searching for a new job but might be open to that perfect role. In a given month, over 70% of LinkedIn users don't visit other leading job sites. So if you're not looking on LinkedIn, you're looking in the wrong place. On LinkedIn, 86% of small businesses get a qualified candidate within 1 day, 24 hours. Hire professionals like a professional on LinkedIn who know that small businesses are wearing a ton of hats and might not have the time or resources to hire. But LinkedIn is constantly finding ways to make that process easier. They even just launched a new feature to help you write your job descriptions, making the process even easier, even quicker. 2.5 million small businesses use LinkedIn for hiring. You could be next. Post your job for free at linkedin.com/LockedOnNBA. That's linkedin.com/LockedOnNBA to post your job for free. Terms and conditions apply. Back here talking Bucks, talking Pacers. Hey, are you watching Fox Sports or ESPN on your TV all day? Do you have to turn that volume down? Thanks to all the shouting, we'll make your switch to Locked On Sports Today. Free 24/7 sports streaming channel programmed for you every day to bring you the biggest stories without all the screaming. Locked On Sports Today brings you can't-miss analysis, opinions, and news, streaming 24/7 on YouTube or the free Amazon Fire TV channels. That part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every single day. I alluded to it, Camille. Who the hell are the Bucks right now? What is going on?
It's a great question. That's a great question. Like we talked about it on Locked On Bucks, like how do you sum up the season? And Justin was like, it's really been like 3 seasons wrapped into one for this Bucks team. And honestly, this is a Bucks team, in my opinion, that got up for good competition and against some other teams where you think like, hey, this might be an easy night. They just didn't seem to have the same level of focus and intensity that was necessary to actually win the game. And that's something that Doc Rivers mentioned after the regular season closed with that loss to the Magic, because Doc was asked like, hey, you guys lost 8 of your last 11 games to end the season. As you mentioned, it was that terrible stretch as well where they lost in Washington, second night of back-to-back, came back home, lost to the Grizzlies. Then they lost to the Raptors, who had just lost 15 straight games. Then they lost to the Knicks at home, which is like, hey, the Knicks are good.
Okay.
But that was That was 3 straight losses at home when they lost to the Knicks, and then they go and beat the Celtics. Of course, Giannis gets injured during that game, so that's unfortunate. And then they go and they beat the Magic without Giannis, and it's like, okay, Bucks, like I see it. You've seen the highs with the wins against like Denver at home, the Thunder win at home, the Clippers. They beat the Clippers twice. Like there are times where you're looking at this team like, hey, I can see it. Like you're playing discipline. The transition defense is good. You're moving the ball. It's not getting stuck. But unfortunately, that wasn't consistent. So back to what Doc was mentioning, and he was like, honestly, I'm not worried about 8 of 11 because we can't get them back. Like no one wants to lose that. And that's on me and the team. But like, what can I do? And then he said, which I thought was so fascinating. He said, we're here for right now. Starting right now is what, unfortunately, I think all our players were looking for, honestly. And that's what we're going to get. Which led me to believe this is a team that has really been trying to get to this moment. They've been trying to get to the playoffs. So people talk about playoff switches. Can you turn it on? Can you turn it off? And for the Bucks, is really like, can you focus a full 48 minutes during the game and execute your game plan, execute switches, communicate properly? Can you do that for a full game? And after doing all my research and my prep for the series, I feel like the Bucks will be able to play a little bit clearer than they did in the regular season because of that added focus of knowing like, hey, this is what we've been waiting to get to all season long.
It's funny you mentioned that because both teams, like the Pacers were second in the league in losses against the teams that had the bottom 5 records. It was crazy, right? Like they were awful in those games. So the thought for both teams is probably like, all right, it's the playoffs. It's a good opponent. We'll be ready. We'll be locked in. No Wizards over there to throw us off our groove. That's interesting though. You know, the inconsistency is just so maddening, especially when it's so hard to say why. And then you ask the players and you know what they're going to say, right? If they could fix it, they would. You know, they want to win every game. They just, something innate is wrong. And so the hope is, and the expectation from fans should be that in the playoffs, that's nonsense. It doesn't matter, right? It's the playoffs. Like the focus level, the energy should be at its absolute apex. Look, we have talked about them all. Haliburton, Dame, Middleton. If and when Giannis plays, Siakam, the stars will define every playoff series, right? The best player always matters. That's generally my tiebreaker for who's going to win a series. But there's always the Duncan Robinson's doing what to get the Heat to the finals, or name your player. Bruce Brown just did what to help the Nuggets win? There's always a role player that steps up. Who on the Bucks, if the Bucks win this series, who's the role player that will be like, that's the guy who shifted the series?
It kind of works in tandem because if the Bucks head into this playoff series with the starting line that they were using to end the season, of course, Giannis might not be in that lineup, so you might see Bobby Portis step in, but they made the switch to move Malik Beasley to the bench and insert Pat Beverly into the starting lineup. Now, Pat Bev is somebody who is, of course, going to be very important for that defensive aspect. I assume that he is going to be the guy who gets that Haliburton matchup initially to start off the game, and you know how important that's going to be. I mentioned facilitation is going to be important for Pat as well with Giannis out. But Malik Beasley is somebody who also is going to play a really important role in the series. And I know he's someone who's been putting out the bulletin board material. He had the quote, back in January, like, I know we're going to see him and it's not going to be good for the Pacers. And then he was asked recently and he pretty much stood on business. He said, I said what I said. I can't walk that back, which I get it. Like, you can't really walk that back. It's like years ago with the Bucks when Brandon Jennings was asked about the series with the Heat. And he's like, Bucks in 6. And he's like, what do you want me to say? Like, I'm not going to come out here and say we're going to get swept. Like,
it turned out to be iconic. So good job, Brandon.
Exactly. So I think Malik Beasley is going to be somebody who's very important because he started the season off really hot from 3, and he's had some stretches here where the 3 ball is failing him. And Malik Beasley is somebody who came over to the Bucks after a year where he was with the Lakers, had some run in the playoffs, but saw his minutes continuously decrease until he finally was no longer part of that rotation. And that's something that really drove him this offseason, something to prove for himself as well. And when he got to Milwaukee, he was cast as the guy who was going to get the other team's best offensive matchup. And that initially surprised, like, why are we casting Malik Beasley as our defensive stopper? And we saw that's not the best use for him, but that does not mean that his effort level hasn't been better. So he is somebody, if he can bring that effort defensively, just try to stay in front of the ball handler, as well as make shots, timely shots, especially with Giannis out for a period of time, assuming he's going to be somebody who could swing a game with his 3-point shooting. And if he is going to be a turnstile defensively as well, because if he can just hold up a little bit better than what we saw in the regular season, plus take advantage of the shots that he's getting. Like, he could be somebody who definitely swings the series.
I like that answer. I think Pacers fans' perception of his defense after the Haliburton fake screen.
Is it Olay?
Yes, yes, is not particularly high. But again, if you can make threes, you have a chance to be the answer to this question, right? Like, I'm torn between Aaron Nesmith for that exact reason. He might be guarding Middleton and will be a key shooter. I think my answer is going to be T.J. McConnell, though. As Bucks fans saw in that,
my God,
that final game in Milwaukee, the last game of the season series, where he was just unbelievably good and had that insane out of bounds save, like with a couple minutes to go, that effectively sealed the game. And now he's like making every shot ever. He's shooting like 60% since the All-Star break and averaging 16 points a game or something crazy. If he's that good and they can't stay in front of him, he's going to get in the lane every possession. So that kind of value where you make a defense shift is very important. And it's just crazy that in 2024, a guy who takes 1-3 a game and can't dunk is so good offensively, but that's what he is. And if the Bucks aren't ready or don't have answers for him, I think he would be my answer. We could not have described more opposite player archetypes, but
TJ is somebody who has given the Bucks fits for years.
It's funny you say that because every fan base says that.
Golly, it's something about TJ McConnell where it's like you see him and you're just like, I can't stand this guy. Like, I wish he was on. Like, he's the kind of guy you love when he's on your team, but you hate when you're playing against him. I assume that's how
that way.
People feel about Bobby Portis as well. We're like, God, Bobby can be annoying, but like, we love Bobby here. Like, that's our guy.
I was in Pfizer for the fifth and final regular season game these two teams played, and I did not realize that fan section that just gushes over Bobby the entire game, how big of a deal he is.
Yeah, and they can feel the whole arena. Like, that's one thing about that home court. Like, if Bobby can get cooking early, like, Pfizer form is going to feed him.
Yes. Okay. Look, people want to know who you got. How many games?
Okay, so here, I'm just gonna go out and say it. At first, I was going like, hey, I'm gonna go Bucks in 6 for the culture, but that just didn't feel right. It just didn't feel authentic to this series. I honestly think it's going to be Bucks in 7. I think it's going to take a full series to put them off, especially not understanding or not knowing what Giannis's health is going to be for this series. But I feel like the Pacers are a tough matchup for this Bucks team for the reasons that we mentioned with the way that they push the pace. And that's something that can be a detriment to this Bucks team. But I think the Bucks have enough pieces around them to be able to win this series. That's part of why you bring a Damian Lillard in on your team. Like, you're hoping that that's can really spark your offense. If you don't have a Giannis in the game, you're hoping to see that Bobby Portis steps up in his place for the meantime, between time. And then you have Chris Middleton, who, and during that finals run, without Chris Middleton, the Bucks don't get past Atlanta in the first place to give Giannis a chance to even play in the finals. So I think the Bucks have enough pieces to win the series. It's just that they have to do the little things right, stick to that game plan, and be disciplined.
Yes, I am also thinking it's going to be a long series. Look, I can't cop out of the question, right? But Giannis's absence amount,
it looms large.
Yeah, it's like if he misses 3 games instead of 2, like, I'm gonna say Pacers in 6. If he only misses 2 games or less, I like your Bucks in 7 pick, because I think it's gonna be hard to beat Giannis 3 times in a series. If he misses 2 games, I think the Pacers would need to win both of those, but those would both be in Milwaukee. And so Dame's going to loom large in those games. If he can just be that guy that got the Portland Trailblazers to the conference finals 5 years ago, then, hey, that's really bad news for the Pacers in those games. Those early games are going to be huge. But I think with him being hurt, Pacers found some solutions against him this season. I'm saying Pacers in 7. If he was healthy, I would not be picking the Pacers. But I think that because they can steal a game early in the series, and I think they can do well against this team, and they're playing well right now, and they found some answers, I'm picking Pacers in 7. I did not think I'd be doing that, but
like, trust me, I get it. I understand. It's going to be a really fun series. I cannot wait until Sunday when this kicks off, just to start seeing how the matchups work out, what changes from game to game, the Giannis health, the Haliburton health, just how they defend each other. Like, it's going to be fun to watch.
And then here's what's going to happen. The Undertaker theme will play. Giannis will come out in a wheelchair and then play in game 1. And then I have to pick Bucks in 5 or something.
And then Bobby Portis will hit like the Kane fire and fire service. She's going to go crazy at that point.
Yeah, there's just so much, like, so many dynamics to this series between what happened in the regular season, the extracurriculars, which will unfortunately be a part of this. I don't care too much to talk about that stuff. Injuries are already a story, which sucks because it's the playoffs. Both fan bases probably feel like they can beat the Knicks or Sixers if they win this series. Like there's so much to it. And I hate that the Giannis injury is going to cloud a lot of what could be an awesome first round series. And the other reason I almost picked Bucks in 7 is the gap in playoff experience, especially early in the series, I think could matter quite a bit. But again, Giannis's injury means I think the Pacers can overcome that early and get some experience under their belt. We'll see who's right. We'll see how this goes. And I'm sure you're going to hear us together as the series progresses. Camille, this was great. Where can my Pacers people find you and your work covering all of the Wisconsin sports, but particularly, of course, for the series, the Bucks?
Yeah, absolutely. Monday through Friday, of course, you can catch me on Locked On Bucks, talking all things Milwaukee Bucks. I'm also on the Technical Foul podcast. That's TECKNICAL. Once a week, every Tuesday we record. It comes out on Wednesdays. We talk NBA, NFL, and pro wrestling. So if that's your bag, jump into that. And then every Friday, I'm on the Pack a Day podcast, talking Green Bay Packers football as well.
No comment on the Packers. Bucks people, I'm on whatever you called the website that used to have a bird logo, at Tony R. East, talking Pacers all the time over there. And the Fever now, which I only say because people not even from here are very interested in Caitlin Clark, and the Bucks are enough in the Midwest that I'm sure people could have some interest there. I was at her introductory press conference this week with stories from that. So check that out if you want. This was great. This series is going to be great. We'll have plenty more on both of our feeds, potentially even before this game, definitely after game 1 on Sunday night. Really looking forward to it, everybody. Have a wonderful weekend. Enjoy game 1. We'll both see you very, very soon.